Welcome to the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations hearing room. This is where some of the most sensitive global issues are discussed, and tonight is where I'm sitting down with three legendary senators. They've been dubbed the Three Amigos. John McCain, senior senator from Arizona, 2008 presidential candidate and ranking member on the Armed Services Committee. Joe Lieberman, senior senator from Connecticut, a former Democrat, who was on the 2000 ticket with Al Gore and chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. And Lindsey Graham, a senior senator from South Carolina, a member of the Armed Services Appropriations and Budget Committees. Welcome to you three.
Thank you.
The Three Amigos, as dubbed by General Petraeus.
Yes.
You forgot to mention he ran for president also and lost, and he'll run and lose someday.
This is, John, much too often when we travel, has described us as the Losers Caucus. As a matter of fact, once we were in Pakistan, and the ambassador, this was 2002, the ambassador was good enough to give a dinner on our honor. McCain and I led the delegation, about 8 other senators, and he gets up to make his toast, and you have, I'm here, McCain, he lost for president, I lost for vice president, 2000. John says, you have here before you the American government in exile.
And by the time this interview is over, you will know why they both lost.
Well, what is known about the three of you? You're very close friends. You sort of represent an era, perhaps, an essence of bipartisanship and genuine cross-party friendship, which many feel doesn't really exist in modern-day Washington. How have you managed to do this, and why can't more of your colleagues do this?
Respect, affection, traveling together. When you travel together, and by the way, other senators have described our travel as death marches. We go to exotic places like Afghanistan and Baghdad and Libya and those really fun places. But I think traveling together has probably been, for years now, we've traveled to the most interesting places, maybe not the most fun places. And so we become friends that way. Here in the Senate, therefore, we have worked together on a lot of national security issues. Lindsey is a reserve colonel in the Air Force. He serves his active duty for years in Iraq, now in Afghanistan. Joe, being a key member of the chairperson of the Homeland Security Committee. And so we have a lot of common interests, common working together has built up a unique friendship over the years.
Yeah, I think this wasn't planned. When I came to the Senate, I admired John McCain from afar. Once I got to know him, I admired him less, but no, that's the...
Familiarity breeds contempt.
Obviously, we've become very close, and I have the greatest admiration for him. But I remember going to see him and saying, you know, I'd like to work together with you. I hope we can work together on something. And it turned out that the first thing we really worked together on was the war in the Balkans, because we were increasingly agitated by what turned out to be genocide, really, and worked with Bob Dole and Joe Biden to push the Clinton administration to finally get into it. But there began a working relationship of friendship, and really based on, I think, values that we all shared. This youngster came along in 2002, the kid, and basically we believe that America has a responsibility to be involved in the world in protection of our values and our strategic interests, all of which helps us be safer and freer here at home, and it's just grown.
Senator Graham, what is the secret to proper bipartisanship, do you think?
Well, in fairness to our colleagues, Piers, there are a lot of real close friendships around this place. There are a lot of Republicans and Democrats who get along very well and work together. The reason you're talking about the three of us, I think, is because of 9/11. If there had never been an attack on America, we'd have been three friends who travel and socialize. But what I think brought us together and put us on the map, after we were attacked on 9/11, everything changed in our country and throughout the world. And as a result of 9/11 and all the national security issues that followed, our friendship became a cause. And I think it really did solidify over the Iraq War. Bipartisanship at its height is being willing to lose your job. And I really admire John because he suffered for our country, and I hang around these guys because I feel young and smart. But the truth of the matter is, John has been a war hero in the true sense of the word. But during the Iraq War, we were one vote away from setting a deadline to withdraw. And Joe was the only Democrat who would cross over. So when you talk about bipartisanship, I think you're really trying to talk about courage. Joe has the courage of his convictions, and it drove him out of his own party. And I don't think there's much of that going on any time in American history, particularly now. So without 9/11, without the Iraq War, without Afghanistan, without the challenges we face, I think we'd just be three friends. And I think we've become a force for the idea that America must lead, because when we don't, other people will.
Could I just mention one other thing about Joe that's interesting? That he supported me in 2008, and yet when the Democrats in majority, they still made him the chairman of one of the most important committees in the entire Senate, the Homeland Security Committee. That's a sign. I've never seen quite that level of respect. And by the way, one of the things that I do for Lindsey is I translate a lot of his remarks into English when we are traveling as well.
We won the South Carolina primary.
I mean, the tragedy of all this, though, is that you are this amazing band, the Three Amigos, but the band is breaking up.
Yeah.
You're retiring.
Yeah, this is the only thing I feel guilty about in regard to my leaving the Senate. But the time came. I've been here 24 years, and I wanted to move on to something else. We'll always be friends. We'll be amigos forever, and maybe they'll find a way to have me, carry their baggage.
But I mean, how do the other guys? I mean, it's been described to me as like ZZ Top, suddenly losing a member, and in comes Katy Perry, because you've got Senator Kelly Ayotte, who's coming in, clearly a very different looking contributor to the band.
Very much better.
I think it's the Temptations without rhythm.
Let me mention one other thing about our relationship. As you know, Joe Lieberman is an Orthodox Jew, and we have had to put up with all the Shabbat stuff, all this lousy food, all the elevators, all the days off, and I want to tell you that we have gotten all the downside, but none of the upside. So I'm seriously thinking about taking up his religion since I've had to eat all that salmon all these years.
They have been very tolerant of me, but I've assured them that it could be that, when they each complete their 120 years on earth and they get to heaven, and at the pearly gates they find a rabbi, they're going to be in great shape.
We were on an airplane flying to Europe, which we do every year, and we were up in a compartment, just the two of us, and I woke up and the sun, it was just starting to get a little light, and I heard this, I saw this figure with a shawl on and doing this mumbo jumbo. I thought maybe I had died.
So then I said, when I tell the story, I say, this is the kind of man John McCain is. He thinks that heaven is populated by praying Jews. What a guy.
I have never known a person in my life that lives his religion to the degree that Joe Lieberman does. He's such a great contrast to people like me and Lindsey, because I've never seen him lose his temper. I've never seen him insult anyone. I have never seen him treat anyone but with the greatest courtesy. I cannot say that about Lindsey Graham or myself.
I mean, your temper is legendarily very
calm. Yes,
very calm, level-headed.
Absolutely.
Have you ever known him not lose his temper?
Oh, yes, many times. But here, I just realized they do
1973.
Right, they do a great service for me, because I don't have to lose my temper, because they do it for me. They express it for me. You guys are being too nice to me.
We had a show last night that was very American in the sense of the topics that we discussed. Bob Costas on. And two things obviously were very pertinent to him: guns and football, and particularly the relationship between the two now. 70% of NFL players now carry guns. And an ongoing debate now, I have to say, not a very loud one. I seem to be one of the few people who even wants to discuss this, about the proliferation of guns in America. You guys have been through decades of this kind of debate. Where do you sit on this? Let me start with you, Senator McCain. Guns in America, should anything be done, or are you comfortable with where things are?
Actually, I'm comfortable. I think that, for example, the killing that has aroused Mr. Costa's anger was an act of hatred and brutality. And if that person wanted to kill somebody, they didn't need a gun to do it. So, look, I just believe that it's one of our rights, and I don't, Joe,
So I start with a belief that the Second Amendment actually does protect the right of individual Americans to own guns. But in my opinion, it's no more unlimited than the right of free speech, which has limits. So I've supported, for instance, bans on the automatic weapons, and for a while, we've been trying to close what's called the gun show loophole. If you go into a store, it's pretty regulated now. To buy a gun, a regular gun shop, there's a check done on you in national computer files of criminal records, even if you can, mental health records or indications of violence. If you go to a gun show, you don't have to do that, and that's a problem. It's even a problem related to Homeland Security, because some terrorists have bought guns at those gun shows. So right of private ownership, but the government has a right to limit it.
I mean, Senator Graham, here's where I come from on this. I come from a country with strict gun control. Yeah. We have 35 to 40 gun murders a year. America has 11 to 12,000. It's the worst rate by miles of any of the advanced countries in the world. Yet nobody thinks this is a problem. Everybody thinks the right to bear arms means, as in Joe Van Belcher's case, he had 8 firearms. Why do you need 8 firearms to defend yourself? And secondly, why would any American, to me, explain to me if you can, why would any American need the right to just have an AK-47 assault rifle, for example? Why aren't there limits on the number of guns and the type of gun?
Well, there are limits. Not anyone can own an automatic weapon. But the Second Amendment came about because of your country. The king wouldn't let average people.
You're going to blame the British?
Absolutely. Yeah. When in doubt, always blame the British.
Is it the constant threat of the British invading again? Because I could probably relax you on that score.
You got to remember, why did they put it in the Constitution? Why did we decide as a nation early on that individuals can have the right to bear arms? Because in England, the individual person didn't have a whole lot of rights about religion, freedom of speech, and we've never had a king here. Some people would suggest that maybe maybe we should. At the end of the day,
or a queen, I hope.
I own more than 8 guns. Why should my constitutional right be limited because you don't understand why I want 8 guns?
Why do you want 8 guns?
Because I enjoy shooting. I hunt. It's something me and my dad did together, and in the South as part of growing up. Now, when people abuse a weapon, I think having additional penalties for a crime committed with a gun makes perfect sense. But we are who we are as Americans, and we have our faults. But the Second Amendment is ingrained in our culture. 90% of the football fans at South Carolina or Clemson home games probably own a weapon. And I just really do believe it's about how you act as a person that determines your fate, not the sensibilities of someone else. Because if my individual rights under the Constitution are limited by the sensibility of others, I don't have a whole lot of rights.
Let's take a break. Let's come back and talk about money. Money, money, money. Because right now, there is a paralysis in this very city about how to resolve things relating to money in America. And I want you 3 to sort it out. I'm in the hearing room of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, and back with me now, the triumvirate of John McCain, Joe Lieberman, and Lindsey Graham. Welcome back to all 3 of you. Lindsey Graham, you said this week you just got re-elected. This is to President Obama. How about doing something big that isn't liberal? How about doing something big that really is bipartisan? Every big idea that President Obama has is a liberal idea that drowns us in debt. How about manning up here, Mr. President, and use your mandate to bring this country to stop us from becoming Greece?
Yeah.
Man up Barack Obama.
Absolutely.
Strong words.
Well, he has a chance to be an historic president. What makes us Greece? It's not because the tax code is at 35% versus 39.6. What's going to make this country Greece, like every other Western nation, we're retiring at 10,000 a day in terms of baby boomers. We have 3 workers for every retiree. In 20 years, we'll have 2. Medicare and Social Security combined are about $40 trillion underfunded. Here's the good news. If you did what Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan chose to do, reform entitlements, we become the most dominant place on the planet pretty quickly. So what I would plead with the president to do is use this mandate. We'll do revenue because we should. Let's do it smartly. But what keeps us from becoming the country we all want to be and damns the future generations of America is unsustainable entitlement spending. And these programs are worth saving. When I was 21, my mom died. When I was 22, my dad died. And if it weren't for Social Security survivor benefits, my sister had never gone to college. Social Security is going to fail. So, Mr. President, work with Republicans to adjust the age for retirement and means test benefits. When I was 22, we needed the 300-something bucks that we got a month. I'm 57, I have no kids. I could easily give up $400 in retirement from Social Security to help people who can't.
Senator Lieberman, Here's the reality, I guess, for the Republicans, and it's that President Obama has won a second term.
Right.
So in many ways, he won the argument, and now I'm sure he's thinking about history and legacy, and he hasn't got to worry about being re-elected. That gives you a power, perhaps, that you don't have in a first term. But he's winning this argument in this sense, I think, on the fiscal cliff debate. He has managed to box the Republicans into a place you just don't want to be, where it looks like you're prepared to allow the middle class of America to get taxed from January onwards at a higher level to save the backsides of the wealthiest 2% of Americans, when 70% of all Americans polls say we want the 2% to be paying more tax. That argument's gone, hasn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, look, the president can rightly say that he made clear during the campaign for re-election that this was the beginning of how he was going to deal with our national debt problems, raise taxes on the top 2%. So he comes in with the mandate, and now he continues to advocate it, and it gets great support from the American people. I think it's part of a solution to our debt problem. But if you raise taxes the way the president wants, it fills about 7% of the hole we've got now in our national debt.
But see, but I would say back to that, it is still 7%. What he also has to do is reduce the entitlements.
Yeah, this is the point.
You guys are the most experienced senators in Washington. Where is this deal, in the end, you think, going to wash up?
You know what? The question is whether we have the political will to put the deal together that most people on both sides, both parties, will tell you is what has to happen. And that is, yes, raise taxes, raise revenues. You got to do that in fairness and in political honesty and practicality. And the second is, the biggest driver of the debt is not the regular spending of our government on things like defense and homeland security, education, environmental protection. It's so-called entitlements. You got to curtail the increase in spending on things like Medicare. They're putting us in the hole. And that's the bargain.
But what you don't want to do, though, Senator Graham, you don't want to make it punitive for people to make charitable donations, for example. To me, that's another lose argument for the Republicans. You've got to be very careful where you encourage the cutting of entitlements, right?
Well, yeah. One thing I don't think I should ask a Democrat to do is turn Medicare into a voucher program. You know, the Paul Ryan budget had a premium support system, which I think makes sense, but a lot of the people on the left are not going to go there. But I think we could adjust the age of eligibility for Medicare from 65 to 67 over the next 30 years.
Right.
You could ask all three of us to pay the full cost of Part B premiums. And when it comes to prescription drug, the prescription drug benefit, make us pay the full cost. We can afford it. But here's what I would say, how this movie ends, and that's your question.
Yeah.
We will wind up losing on the probably the rate issue by the end of the year to some extent. I think capping deductions is a better way to generate revenue, but there'll come a time in February and March where we have to raise the debt ceiling. And when you're $16 trillion in debt, somebody in this place needs to say, stop borrowing until you address why we're in debt. I will not raise the debt ceiling ever again until we get significant entitlement reform, because if we don't reform entitlements, we're going to become Greece. So this fight goes from the end of the year to raising the debt ceiling in February and March. And that's a chance for the president to lead this nation, to get Republicans and Democrats in a room and do something I wanted to do for 20 years, save Social Security and Medicare from bankruptcy and the country from becoming Greece. But if he doesn't lead, there's going to be one hell of a fight over raising the debt ceiling.
John McCain, in the end, the Republicans, whatever is being said right now, are going to have to acquiesce to him on that point, for him to want to acquiesce to what the Republicans want on entitlements.
I think that's very possible that that could be the outcome, and I agree with you. He won the election, and he has the upper hand, and he has the upper hand in public opinion polls right now, as you mentioned. But at the same time, it seems to me the way you do these things that I've seen in the past is call people over and sit down and start having conversations.
Well, why isn't that happening?
Don't go out and can't continue the campaign that is over.
Right, but I think there's blame on both sides there. There seems to be a strange disconnect between Speaker Boehner, for example, and the president. When you compare it to Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, or even Newt Gingrich in the second term of Bill Clinton, both of them told me, Clinton and Gingrich, they would get in a room, often throw out all the advice advisors,
Exactly.
thrash out a deal. I see no sense of that relationship.
Maybe they began that on Sunday. I mean, I have the feeling that if you really left it to the president and the speaker, Obama and Boehner, that they could work it out. Now, they got forces behind both of them that'll try to separate them, but that's where their leadership it comes into play. Look, this country, I'd rather be an American economically poised for the future than a citizen of any other country in the world. What's standing in the way of us really surging economically is the government. And if we can get together and adopt a bipartisan long-term debt reduction plan, I think our economy is going to take off.
Well said. Well said. We're going to leave it there because I want to get into foreign policy now. You are the three amigos, the experts in this genre. I want to talk about the Middle East exploding, as you've hinted at, and also about Benghazi and Susan Rice, which I know is a favourite subject of yours, Senator.
So good of you, Piers.
I'm here in Washington. I'm back with three of the great legendary senators, John McCain, Joe Lieberman and Lindsey Graham.
Legendary means old.
Yes, it does. I stand by my comments, Senator. Just on same-sex marriage, America's moved incredibly fast. At the time that all three of you had been in the Senate even, you're now seeing same-sex marriage being legalized in many states. Do you think that younger people don't care nearly as much about it as their parents and grandparents?
I think part of it's generational. I think a part of it's the media. I mean, you're casting movies and TV shows where people are same-sex couples are funny, charming, and kind. The point is that you can be funny, charming, and kind and be in love with somebody of the same sex. What's the role of the law here? We're not talking about an academic discussion. When is it proper for the government to set boundaries in terms of relationships? It's clearly proper to say you can't kill someone. And I have no problem with people passing on their property to someone they love. I have no problem with people having the ability to engage in a free and open life. A lot of this is religious. In my state, we're not going to change the traditional definition of marriage. And I would support the traditional definition of marriage, not out of hate, but if I believe that I think that's just best for society. At the end of the day, states will come out differently on this issue, and I think that's the way it should be. I think each state should set the terms.
Can America really stand for freedom and genuine equality if half the states continue to view the rights of a homosexual couple to get married in a completely different way to the way they view the rights of a heterosexual couple?
Can people in a republic, can people in South Carolina and New York differ? I hope so. But can we do it in a way
Can they both be equal?
Well, here's what...
Can they both espouse equality if actually in one state you can't get married and another you can't?
Going to answer that question this term. Really, that's the basic question. Well, two. One is it unconstitutional to prohibit same-sex marriage?
Yes. What do you think? Yes or no?
What do I think they're going to decide?
What do you think they should decide?
I think that marriage ought to be decided by the states. So that would mean that some states would have the right to prohibit same-sex marriage. Although I must tell you...
That's the principle of the conservative federalist belief.
But it seems so un-American to me.
Well,
here's a country, I'm sorry, but here's a country that stands on the grounds of freedom, democracy and equality. And here you are all telling me that's fine as long as you're in the right state. I don't get that.
I've been waiting to ask you this question.
Go on.
If it's based on love, can three people love each other?
Can three people love each other? Why would you need three people?
Well, is it possible for three people to genuinely love each other and want to share their lives together?
Of course it is.
Okay, then, is it okay to have three people marry each other?
I would say not. I don't think that's the debate. I don't think we're asking. I've not heard anybody arguing for the rights of three people to marry at the same time. No, but that's a facile point.
Why?
Because the point is simply a homosexual couple's right to get married in the same way as a heterosexual couple in America. Now, what all three, unless I'm wrong, what you're all three saying is, yes, if you're in the right geographic part of the country. And to me, that isn't equality.
The Constitution of the United States says all rights are reserved for the states. except for those given to the government.
But there are many federal laws.
There are.
And the argument now in the Supreme Court will be, should it be a federal issue? And I don't see how you can be a free and equal America unless this is a federal decision that says all rights are equal.
Do you respect the religious belief of people who
would
believe...
Do
you respect those religious beliefs? And if they reflect those religious beliefs in the laws that are passed by their states...
I do respect religious beliefs.
If that's the will of the people...
But there are many people of different religions in many different states, as you know.
Certainly are.
Would you respect the original rights of the Founding Fathers to allow slavery? No. Would you allow slavery in some states, but not others?
You know what we're dealing with here? There's been a legal tradition in our country, and it runs straight into what you're asking, which is that the states are the place where domestic law, family law, is determined, state by state. The Supreme Court may say that's no longer valid. Incidentally, I just say this to you. Connecticut, same-sex marriage is legal in Connecticut. Somebody asked me recently, how has it changed things? And you know, I thought about it, and to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't changed things at all. It hasn't really changed anybody's life except people who are gay or lesbian and want to.
All it's done is make certain people's lives happier and better.
Can I suggest this? Slavery was outlawed by a constitutional amendment. Go watch Lincoln. Great movie.
Yeah.
The people decided. The question for us is, who should decide these things? Should it be a handful of judges, or it should be the people themselves? And I come out on the side of the people themselves. Different people will look at it differently, but slavery was outlawed by a constitutional amendment. If you want to propose a constitutional amendment legalizing same-sex marriage and it passes, that's the law of the land.
Well, here's my bet. My bet is that in 25 years it will have happened. Very quickly, on pot. Are you in favor of legalizing pot?
What the experts tell me, at least the ones I've talked to, is really a gateway drug and may lead to more drug addiction.
Senator Graham, I've got to ask one of you.
Well,
have you ever inhaled?
No. No.
Do you ever wish you had, just to find out?
I don't pretend to be normal. I'm not saying.
Really?
No. I mean, at the
how abnormal are you?
At the end of the day, I want to be me.
Pretty abnormal.
Yeah, right. Within the confines of the law. The gun control is a federal thing. It's called the Second Amendment. You know, we're not known as constitutional scholars for a reason, but I'll take a shot at the pot question. I think the federal government has preempted the states in this area. I think to create order and not chaos, you have to have sometimes a national regime to make sure that you have commerce and people can live without fear and reprisal. And sometimes in a constitutional democracy, you let people go their own way. It's called democracy. The thing I love the most about America is that so far, after 200-something years, you can disagree on all this stuff and be friends, and you'll have a chance to vote for people whether you like them or not on one issue or a bunch of issues.
Okay, let's take a final break. We'll be right back with more from the Three Amigos. Back with the Three Amigos, and a final question for you, gentlemen, and quickly if you don't mind. It's Christmas coming. What would you most like politically as a gift?
Obviously, I think all of us and all Americans, a resolution of this issue of the fiscal cliff so that people can live next year with a sense of predictability, with a sense that we can have a growing economy and, frankly, peace in the world.
And a place on this committee?
Oh, I think it'd be fun to do.
I'll take that as a yes.
There you go.
Senator Lieberman.
Christmas and Hanukkah.
Yes.
So, what would I really like from the president?
Yeah.
That he take that leadership that he's now been empowered with by the election, bring the parties together, beginning with Speaker Boehner and the other leaders, and agree on a bipartisan package that will reduce the debt, increase taxes, and cut the increase in spending on entitlements. Okay. That'll do it. And that'll usher in a brilliant new period in America's economic history.
Sounds good. Senator Graham?
3 things. That the president would agree to...
We only had one.
Well, we do, but...
This is America. You can have 3. That the president would announce that he will leave a follow-on force in Afghanistan of 15 to 20,000 to make sure the place doesn't fall back into radical hands. That the world would get behind the people in Syria and end Assad's regime. And that the president would lead us toward entitlement reform so we can keep this country from becoming Greece. Okay, well, it's been a fascinating hour, gentlemen. Thank you so much for sparing the time. The 3 amigos you are sadly about to become the 2 amigos, although I suspect the friendship will continue.
It will, forever.
Yes. Thank you all very much for joining me.